This happened 2 summers ago while I was house sitting out in California for an elderly couple I had met at a work conference. It seemed to be the dream scenario. The couple wanted to vacation in Hawaii for 2 weeks, but didn't want to board their cats. And I had been chatting with them about wanting to visit California again, because I had loved it so much the first time I went. So we figured that we could mutually benefit each other if I came out and house sat for them. So I flew out there, and they showed me around for a few days. They taught me how to take care of their 2 cats, one of which was extremely shy and who I barely ever saw, which will be important later. They also showed me how to take care of their plants and gave me access to their cars. These people were very generous. And before I knew it, I had dropped them off at the airport and was now on my own. At first, it really was the dream vacation. In the mornings, I would walk out of the front door and shortly be hiking through the trails that surrounded the nearby Mount Diablo. I was so enamored by the area that I actually started looking into taking steps to try and relocate there. But then one day, about halfway through my final week there, when I got back to the house, I felt really odd, almost like I shouldn't go inside. I shook it off and went inside anyway, because it was getting late. Once I was inside, I forced myself to ignore how off it felt, and made some food for myself, put out dinner for the cats, and then went to bed. I was shocked to find that the shy cat was hiding under my bed and crying. This was the first time I had ever seen her up close. The entire time I had been there, she never left my host's bedroom, unless she didn't realize that I was around. Again, I ignored the weird feeling, and just assumed that she had decided that I was okay, and then went to sleep. I did start locking my bedroom door at night though. I also remember that about halfway through that night, I thought I heard someone walking around on the gravel outside of my window, but after listening for a bit, and not hearing anything else, I went back to sleep. The following morning, I still had this strange feeling, but I decided to go on with my plans for the day. I drove out to this little music festival in Sonoma, and went clothes shopping, and overall had a great day. When I got back to the house though, I found that the front door was locked in a way that I had not left it. Basically, the deadbolt was never locked, only the lower lock, and that's the only lock that my key worked on. But the deadbolt was definitely locked for some reason, so I had to call my hosts and find a hidden key, which, to their credit, was buried about a whole foot under a bush outside that had definitely not been unearthed in a long time. So I used the key, went inside, and kept it with me just in case it happened again. And it did. But with a different door this time. I had stepped out into the garage to get a drink, and when I turned around to go back into the house, the door was shut and locked. I could use my normal key on that door, but I was still pretty bewildered. My own cats are whack, so I think in my mind I was trying to come up with some way that the cats could be locking me out of the house. But that was just too crazy. I decided that I must have been misunderstanding how the locks worked, and wrote it off, and I started to check the locks when I went out of the house or into the garage. That night when I went to bed, the really awful feeling of unease was still there, and so was the shy cat, who was clearly unhappy to see me, but also wouldn't leave my room. But again, I just locked my bedroom door and went to sleep. The next morning I felt awful, nausea, body ache. I had no desire to leave the house, so I decided to stay in and watch Netflix for a day. But as the day went on, I started to get that strange feeling again, and then it morphed into that unmistakable feeling of being watched. Around mid-afternoon, it got to the point where I was so uneasy, I decided to get out of the house for a bit to shake it off. I was getting a bit low on food anyways, so I went to the store and bought a couple of food items that I didn't think would hurt my stomach. And as I started to leave the checkout line, the cashier said the generic, "Have a great evening," and then I just instantly started crying, shocking myself and the poor cashier, because I had this intrusive thought that said, "You might be the last person to ever say that to me." When I got in my car, I was still crying, and my entire body was telling me not to drive back to that house, but I had no choice. I couldn't just neglect the cats. So I drove back, parked in the driveway, and convinced myself for about a half an hour just to go open the front door. Once I did that, I thought I would get over it and be able to go in and at least feed the cats, and then maybe I would go get a hotel room after. But my body physically would not let me inside. It was like I was stuck in the entryway. I then made a deal with myself. I would yell into the house, saying that I had already called the police and they were on their way. I figured that would make anyone leave the house. So I faced inside the house, looking down the hallway towards the bedrooms, and I did just that. The second I was done saying, "They're almost here, so if you want to avoid being arrested, you need to leave now," the light in my host's bedroom turned on, and I heard a banging noise. I immediately hightailed it back to my car, called the police for real, and proceeded to have a mental breakdown while talking to the dispatcher. They checked out the house, and didn't find anyone there. However, the double doors in my host's bedroom were left wide open, and there was a pile of food wrappers in the corner behind the blinds. So they said it looked like someone had been there, and, based on the shape of the house, they would have had the perfect vantage point to see me in the living room, watching TV. The police told me that they would patrol the area, but that there was nothing else that they could do. The minute they were gone, the shy cat was right back in my host's bedroom, and I didn't see her again until I left to go back home. This experience messed me up pretty bad, especially because they never caught the person, and didn't seem to have any real desire to look. I still had to stay in that house for the next 3 days. Nothing else odd happened, and I didn't get that strange feeling for the rest of the time that I was there. But the damage was done. I've never felt completely safe in a home without doing a complete search before bed, but I'm extremely glad that I trust my gut feeling. I guess I would rather have some residual anxiety than be dead.
I live in Florida, and this incident happened about 3 weeks after Hurricane Irma, so not that long ago. Back in July, the ex and I had just finalized the divorce, and I moved into a gated neighborhood where every house was rented out by the same several rental company or landlords. It's a very small neighborhood, with about 15 houses tops. All 15 houses are bordered around a man-made lake with the backyards facing the lake. No one really has a fenced backyard. When you walk out your back door, you see a lake in front of you, and your neighbor's backyard on each side of you. Everyone in the neighborhood seemed very close. Someone was always hosting a family-friendly barbecue or having people over to watch sports. I was, or am, still depressed by my divorce. So, I never really partook in these social gatherings. The only person I got to know was my next-door neighbor, Steve, an active Navy soldier with a huge love for guns. Steve is the true hero in this nightmare. My daughter, Alice, is 4 years old, and I get her every weekend. Alice's bedroom window faces the backyard towards the lake. I spoil that girl to death. She truly is my everything, and I count down the days to the weekend every week just to be with her. That's why I was upset when Irma came and I had to go almost 3 weeks without seeing her. The weekend before the storm, she was with her mom. Then obviously, the weekend of the storm, she was with her mom. Then, on top of that, the weekend after, she had to be with her mom because my power was still out. No AC in Florida is miserable. The humidity was so bad that week that I slept in my daughter's room the whole week because she had the only room with a window that faced the lake. I opened the window, exposing just the window screen, so the wind from the lake could come and cool my room as much as possible while I slept. Eventually, the power comes back, and Alice starts visiting me again like normal. That was when the nightmare started. My daughter would complain about the singing lady, and how she doesn't like her anymore. I thought maybe she was referring to one of my ex's friends or one of the teachers at her school. Maybe there was a teacher at her school that sang to the kids and she didn't like it. That Saturday night, Alice woke up in the middle of the night screaming bloody murder. I ran into her room and turned on the light and found her hiding under her covers. I asked her what was wrong, and all she could do was point to an empty corner of her room and say, "Look, look!" There was nothing there. She was acting as if she saw a ghost. After I calmed her down, she started to talk about the singing lady again. "Please tell the singing lady not to come back. Please, Daddy, make her go away." Obviously, she's having nightmares, right? I showed her there was nothing in the closet and nothing under the bed, and that there was nothing to be afraid of. She calmed down and went back to sleep. I went back to my room and quickly fell back asleep myself. I couldn't have been asleep more than 20 minutes before Alice comes running into my room screaming, "She's back! She's back!" Alice absolutely refused to go back to her room, so I let her sleep with me. The next morning, Sunday morning, I took Alice out to breakfast, and we stopped by Target to pick up a baby monitor. I haven't used one since her mom and I were married, but I wanted to easily be able to hear if or when she started having these nightmares again, so I could respond quicker. After I set them up, I showed Alice how they worked to give her assurance that I could hear her, she was safe. That night she slept soundly and didn't make a peep all night. The following weekend, Alice had to stay with her mother again because she caught a stomach virus from one of her little friends at school. It was Saturday night, and I was sound asleep in my bed. Around 2 a.m., I heard it. A woman's voice, humming a soft nursery rhyme through the baby monitor. The humming, soft singing got louder and clearer as the voice got closer to the monitor. I wasn't dreaming. I could hear a woman softly singing lullabies in my daughter's bedroom. I had never been so scared and dumbfounded in my life. I was feeling a mixture of pure terror and disbelief. Then the voice spoke out. "Alice? Sweetie, are you awake?" Adrenaline shot through my veins. I jumped out of bed and locked my bedroom door. I picked up my cell and called Steve from next door. He didn't waste a second. As soon as I got off the phone with him, I heard him storm out of his back door screaming, "Don't fucking move!" I ran outside and found him, aiming a shotgun at a woman crouched outside my daughter's window. The one I had left open after Irma and had never closed. Steve quickly dropped his guard when he recognized the woman. It was Jean, the neighborhood maintenance woman. Steve's wife came running out after him and confirmed it was her. Jean played dumb, said she was not singing, and didn't even know my daughter's name. She said she was near my daughter's window because she was doing her weekly patrol for gators and thought she saw one approach our house from the lake. I called bullshit. That bitch was singing, and she called out to my daughter by name. Yeah, it's true that there have been a few gator spottings around the neighborhood, and yes, part of Jean's job was to patrol the lake at night and every now and then, but at 2 a.m., I obviously knew this was BS. And even though neither Steve or his wife called her out on it, I could tell from the look on their faces that they didn't believe it either. The next morning, I went over to Steve's house to thank him and tell him exactly what happened. He told me Jean and her husband had been known to be a little cuckoo, but this was by far the craziest thing that had ever happened. Steve helped me install metal bars on Alice's window that afternoon.
Graphic warning. This is something that has been very traumatic for me, and is something that is never discussed in my household. I was talking with my mom about it the other night, and she still didn't say much. When I was 13, I got a Dell desktop for school. The internet was fairly new to me back in 2003. The AOL chat rooms was where I spent most of my time. I was a shy, overweight kid back then, and I'm still shy to this day. But online, I could be whoever I wanted. I could say anything, and it was amazing. I discovered so many things when I would log on the internet. This is how I ended up talking to a 27-year-old man. One night I logged on. Remembering the AOL dial-up sound still gives me an uneasy feeling to this day. I was sitting in my cold, dark kitchen. The computer was located here, so that I could be monitored every time I was using it. But it was just me and my mom at the time, and she was always working. Plus she had no idea how to use the computer anyways, so I got away with a lot. I was bored, so I hopped in an AOL chat room, and I looked around for a bit. I was saying that I was 15, which made me feel so much more mature. "Hey, my name's Rob. Where are you from?" That's how it started out. I told him where I was from, and that I was in high school. He responded that he was 19, and was from New York. I thought it was really cool that I was talking to an older guy, and honestly I thought he was really cute. We kept messaging each other back and forth, and would even occasionally talk on the phone. I remember finding out that he was talking to another girl, and I wanted him to break things off, but he begged and pleaded with me until I caved. And shortly after, we met in person. I was nervous. He had never asked me for a picture. In fact, he never really asked much from me. Just the emails back and forth, and one phone call a day. But he made me feel safe. He made me feel wanted and cared for. He drove from New York to my home state of West Virginia one day. My mom worked right beside my house, so he parked about a quarter-mile away and walked down the back alley to enter my house. My friend was with me when he showed up, but was scared when she saw him and ran out of the back door. Maybe I should have taken the hint, but I just stood on the back porch with my head down. I was given a hug as he led me inside. Not 5 minutes after being there, sitting on the couch, did he move things further, and eventually we ended up in my bedroom. I'm not going to go into details of what happened next. I assume that most of you can guess. After that, he left, and said that he would pick me up when I went to school the next day, so that we could go out on a date. I had no idea where he was staying. I lived in a very country area, about an hour's drive from the nearest hotel. The next day, I got ready for school, rode the bus for the 45-minute drive, and as soon as I got to the school parking lot, I get directly into his car. No one noticed. We never really went on a date. He just found different places to park so that he could use me. I noticed a photo of another young girl, 15, maybe 16, in the visor of his car. I asked him about it, and I believed him when he told me that it was his cousin. I believed him when he told me that I couldn't see his driver's license because he had left it at the hotel, and I believed him when he said that he loved me. He dropped me back off at school, and I was super sad that he told me that he was going back home. He promises that he would call me. This is where my memory gets a little fuzzy. I can't remember many of my emotions from this time. I do remember a few days later my mom says that she found out that I skipped school with a man, and that I was never to see him again, and that was that. I do remember sending an email, and I do remember a late-night phone call. "I wish you could just come and live with me," I remember him saying, and I told him that I wanted to. A few days later, he made the drive again, and I was feeling iffy about leaving my mom. I did love her after all, but back then, I didn't put much thought into anything really. I packed up a few clothes in a suitcase. I forgot all my underwear. That's something that sticks out to me. I felt bad that he drove 8 hours to come get me, so I left in the middle of the night, got into the car with him and his cousin, and we drove off. He got in the back seat with me, and proceeded to have sex with me while his cousin drove. He then got back into his front seat. This happened a few times between my home and his. The drive took forever. I had nothing to drink, and I was offered nothing. When they stopped to take a nap at a rest stop, I attempted to call my mom, which was disabled on our phone. I dug around for some change to get something to drink, but I couldn't afford anything, so I drank out of the truck stop sink. Hours later, we park a block away from his house while he runs in to get something. I'm sitting in his back seat, waking up from a nap, when around 8 or so men and women wearing black suits surround the car, screaming at us to get out with our hands up. My first thought was, shit, first 10 minutes in New York, and we're already getting robbed. I was terrified. I exit the car. An officer pulls me over to the curb, while Rob's cousin is forced to the ground. All the while they are asking my name and age. I was then put into the back of an unmarked car, driven to the police station, passing reporters, cameras, and news trucks. I was then snuck in through the back, where I see Rob for the last time, in handcuffs. And for the in-love 13-year-old me, this was devastating. I was taken into a room and questioned for hours. I was then taken to the hospital, and then to a hotel, where a nice woman, I'm guessing who was a social worker, brings me Taco Bell, and stays with me until I fell asleep. The next day, 2 FBI agents escort me home on a plane. Once we landed, I was greeted by police officers and my mother, and a horde of news reporters. I later found out when my mom reported me missing, the police didn't want to do much. They didn't even want a picture of me. My mother saw us leave that night, and she had his license plate number. She even remembered seeing his car parked down the road the first time he came. She took note that they were out-of-state tags. She was very vigilant. I'm pretty sure that this is the only reason that I'm still alive today. The police said that they were going to look into it, but that wasn't enough for my mom. She contacted a family friend, who in turn contacted the governor of West Virginia, and that's when the police really started taking this more seriously. They ran the license plate number and found out who he was. They then issued an APB, noting that I was in extreme danger. My cousin took a look at Rob's rap sheet, which was a mile long, but wouldn't tell my mother what was on it, for fear of scaring her even more. I never went to court or attended any hearings, but I did fall into a horrible depression. My friends' parents wouldn't let them hang out with me. The word slut was spray painted on my locker at school. I had no friends, but worst of all, I thought a man was in prison for loving me. When I learned that he got sentenced to 10 years in prison, I became deeply troubled. I've been in and out of the mental hospital for self-harm for years, on a slew of antidepressant medication. My teenage years were tough. I ended up transferring schools, made new friends, and eventually graduated. But in the back of my mind, I still felt that I was the reason a man lost 10 years of his life, until I was told that he was let out of prison. A couple of years after he was out, I contacted him on Facebook. At the time, I was around 24 or 25 years old. He told me that if I ever contacted him again, he would kill both me and my mother, and that he still knows where I live. I have no idea what he planned to do with me that day. My mom tells me that he was planning on selling me to sex traffickers, and I was also told that he had other girls my age that he was talking to. There were some good things that happened because of my kidnapping. Schools all over my state started internet safety classes, and no other girls were taken by this man. So to the man who ruined so many years of my life, I'm 29 now. I am happy, healthy, and I have zero remorse that you are now listed as a level 3 sex offender, and that you were in prison for so many years. If you have kids, please check what they're doing online. While your kid might be smart, and you know that they would never do anything crazy, it never hurts to check. There are creeps out there who target children.